But if you are looking to invest in a quality revolver that is ready to go out of the box, then the modern Smith & Wesson is a bit of a mixed bag. Hey everyone, I'm Brett, and welcome to Nightwood Guns. Whenever someone asks me what my favorite carry revolver is, I always answer that I carry the 586 L Comp from the Smith & Wesson Performance Center, but I don't really recommend it. And in today's review, I'm going to explain why. People who know that I'm a Smith & Wesson revolver nerd, when they ask me what I carry, they're usually surprised that I hold up a modern offering from Smith & Wesson, because I have some pretty nice classic wheel guns, like the Model 66 No Dash, a Smith & Wesson Lou Horton offering that is a 681-4 with, quad Magnum ports on it, and this beautiful Lou Horton 29-3 and 44 Magnum. And all of those have no internal locks added on by lawyers. They have the superior hammer nose firing pin that is a superior ignition system, and obviously fit and finish is way better, as are the triggers. But it boils down to this: I don't want to sweat all over those beautiful, nearly irreplaceable revolvers, and if I had to use it in a defensive shoot, I wouldn't mind losing this, whereas I would be devastated to lose those. Not because of how much they cost, but because how hard it would be to replace them. So in this video, I'm going to go over the features of the 586 L Comp, along with the pros and the cons, and yes, we're going to touch on modern Smith & Wesson quality control. And when I first got this gun, I was actually pretty disappointed in it, but I changed a few things on there that transformed this into being my favorite carry revolver. There are no sponsors for today's video, so I just ask that you make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you enjoy my videos, hit that like, thumbs up button if you're enjoying yourself, and drop a comment down below to help boost the video. If you'd like to take it a step further, you can check out my Patreon, merch, or my books on Amazon, and the links in the description below. Seriously, the success of this channel is all thanks to you guys, and I always appreciate your support. So first of all, let's touch on Smith & Wesson's modern quality control, and why it's one of the reasons that I don't really recommend this gun for carry for most people. So it used to be that you only had to really look over an older Smith & Wesson revolver because you didn't know if someone monkeyed around on the inside of it, you don't know how many rounds are through it, so you're checking timing on all the cylinders and single action and double action. You're also checking the cylinder gap, lockup, checking for end shake or hammer push. But we've now hit a point in modern manufacturing where you have to check that on brand new revolvers too. So every time any of my many local shops got one of these in, I would check it over, and it took 3 years and probably rejecting about 7 or 8 of these to finally land on one that was acceptable. Considering how much this costs and the fact that it comes out of the Performance Center, I expect this thing to act like a new revolver. The most common thing is that timing was off on at least one of the chambers, and the next most common thing is it had scratches, nicks, and dings kind of all over it, just major cosmetic issues. I would look this over in the store, and then there'd be like a Smith & Wesson rep in the corner with his arms crossed, and he'd just say, "It fell down some stairs." And the third most common issue is something that I'm currently struggling with on the new black edition of the 640-1, and that is sometimes on the trigger reset, it will get stuck at the halfway point and you have to put your finger behind it and force it forward. And again, this is also an expensive Performance Center revolver, and I had to go through 3 of these to find one that was the least bad. So I settled on one that had a sticky cylinder. It almost felt like it had a ball detent in there. You had to muscle and break loose the cylinder out of the frame, which is wild. This is the main reason that I don't recommend modern Smith & Wesson revolvers for most people, and if I do, I always have an asterisk of I would plan on sending this to Nelson Ford at the Gunsmith Inc. to have him do an action job on it and to make sure it's running the way it should. Also, with modern Smith & Wesson, not just with their revolvers, but kind of across all of their lines, they make some really weird, tone-deaf decisions when it comes to the details. For example, the 586 L Comp comes with possibly the worst front sight I've ever seen on a revolver. It is a flat black, ramped sight that has the world's smallest vial of tritium in it. And anyone who spent any amount of time shooting any gun with iron sights knows that it's kind of important to have a brighter or easy to see front sight. If that wasn't bad enough, it's like they haven't learned their lesson over the last several decades and they had a really shallow rear sight notch. So I ended up putting on this SDM gold bead front sight and a D&L Sports rear sight. This sight combination has been absolutely dynamite and I highly recommend it. It significantly elevates the 586 L comp. But again, this is kind of like a common sense thing that you'd think they would figure out for a performance center revolver, especially since they've been making the L comp series for so long. Some evidence of this is the fact that Lipsey's kind of came out of the woodwork and smacked Smith & Wesson upside the head and introduced the ultimate carry J-frame revolver that had that beautiful bright green front sight on there, a U-notch rear that is windage adjustable. They also had those amazing VZ boot grips on there, and they also brought back the mountain gun series, which was a design that has always been in high demand. So it's clear that Lipsey's has some actual revolver enthusiasts over there that know what features actual revolver end users want. And also those new Lipsey's collaboration mountain guns don't have the internal lock on them. However, I did look at one of those mountain guns that came into my local shop and it was a disaster. Like, even worse quality control than what I was seeing on the 586 L comp over the course of 3 years. Lipsey's can only do so much. Smith & Wesson is still producing the guns. I don't know, guys. I even have a suspicion that the metal they're using to make these is softer than that of days past. It doesn't take much to ding one of these up. So with all of that in mind, why would you even want to get a modern Smith & Wesson revolver? Well, the fact is that Smith & Wesson, despite their flaws, they're standing on the shoulders of giants. The Smith & Wesson revolver has an excellent set of bones. It is a durable, reliable design with a very fast trigger reset for fast double action shooting. And in general, they have amazing ergonomics, everything from the way it points to the cylinder release. So with all of that context, let's hop into the 586 L comp. This is an L frame revolver chambered in .357 Magnum, boasting a 7-shot cylinder that is cut for moon clips. So just to show you the other frame sizes so you can kind of have a reference as to how big this thing is, this is their N frame. .357 Magnum was originally on this N frame, but it was a little too big, heavy, and bulky to carry, so then they jammed it into the smaller K frame. But the way they were designing the revolvers back in the day, the K-frame couldn't quite handle .357 Magnum over high round counts and over a long period of time. So then they beefed it up and gave us this L-frame, which can handle .357 Magnum forever. And then of course we have their smallest offering, the J-frame, which is the easiest and lightest to carry. So I consider the L-frame to be closer to a full-size revolver than a compact revolver, but with a set of concealable grips, a good holster, and a sturdy belt, it's a piece of cake to carry. Now I know someone's probably wondering why carry the 586 L comp over the Model 19 L comp. So it's going to be the size of this Model 66 here with a 6-shot capacity over a 7-shot capacity. And while the extra round on this is nice, especially at this limited capacity, every additional round is kind of a big deal. The reason is that the L frame and the K frame are close enough in size that they'll actually kind of fit in the same holster. So this is my L frame holster, and the K frame also fits in there perfectly, and vice versa. You need to loosen the retention just like a quarter turn or a half turn on the K-frame holster to fit the L-frame in there, but that's how close they are in size, so I'll take the extra round when overall footprint isn't that big of a difference. And any kind of weight difference between the two is nullified by a quality sturdy belt. So the 3-inch barrel on this one is a great size for carry, not too long, not too short, and its 36-ounce weight makes sure it can eat up that .357 Magnum recoil. So I know someone's gonna ask how I carry this. I carry it appendix in a JM Custom Kydex Wing Claw 2.0 with discrete carry concept clips and a Tier 1 concealed foam wedge on the back to aid in concealment. Now, speaking of the weight soaking up some recoil, the biggest feature on the 586 L comp is the integral compensator on the barrel. This is a single port comp, and unlike the M&P 9mm carry comp, the .357 Magnum is actually putting out enough juice and velocity for this single port to actually do something. Now, like I said, this comp actually works, and I actually really appreciate that it's on here because the whole reason I'll carry a revolver over a semi-auto is for that increase in power. Now, I really like this Barnes TAC XPD 125 grain .357 Magnum cartridge, but you were looking at 1,200 feet per second of muzzle velocity and 400 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. If you're well-versed in ballistics, this is actually pretty close to 9mm 124 plus P Federal HSTs, of which you can get double the capacity in a semi-auto. The difference with this .357 Magnum loading, though, is that it expands way more. This will expand to 3/4 of an inch in ballistic gelatin. And it dumps the energy way faster, getting 14 inches of penetration, whereas HSTs, I think, get like 16 to 18 inches, somewhere around there. This is some gnarly stuff. It does really well out of short barrels if you can handle the recoil. It's what I carry in my J-frame 357 mags. However, if I'm gimping myself with capacity and a double action trigger pull with a revolver, I want more juice than a 124 plus P 9mm. So what I carry in this is Buffalo Bore Heavy 357 Magnum, still in that lightweight 125 grain bullet, so it's not going to overpenetrate. So out of a 3-inch barrel like this, we're looking at almost 1,500 feet per second coming out of the barrel, and around 600 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. And using those loads, this integral compensator really makes a difference at taming the muzzle rise so you can get faster follow-up shots. If you're not going to carry some ass-kicking hand cannon loads out of a revolver, then I don't see why you would carry one over a semi-auto unless you just liked them. It's ballistic performance like that that has me carrying a revolver over a semi-auto with over double the capacity of still decent 124 plus P rounds on occasion, not all the time. Now I will say, as far as efficiency goes, the single port comp does its job, but it's not as efficient as something like Magnum porting or the quad porting here on this Lew Horton. This comp also directs all of the muzzle flash straight up, so if you're shooting at low light, it could possibly be distracting, especially with 357 Magnum ass blasters coming out of this thing. Whereas porting like this will direct it out to the sides, so you get kind of a V-shaped blast, leaving you a little viewing port through the muzzle blast. I mean, it's still bright, but if I had to pick one over the other, I pick this. Another design feature I appreciate on this to help keep muzzle rise down is this full lug under the barrel here. This revolver is also finished in what I'm assuming is a black Cerakote, which is great for corrosion resistance. I sweat all over this thing, and I've had no issues with any kind of rust or corrosion, but it does not hold up well to holster wear, so if you're actually going to use this thing, accept that it's going to be a workhorse and a beater. That is the whole reason I bought this thing, because I wanted a revolver that I could run hard, thrash around, sweat all over, and not feel guilty for destroying essentially what's considered nowadays as being a work of art. This revolver also comes with 2 sets of grips. One is a set of wood boot grips. I think they're probably from Altamont. They are pretty boxy, squared off, not very comfortable with some hard edges on them. And it comes with Hogue rubber Bantam style grips that are really nice for shooting, decent for concealment, but that kind of rubber tends to hang onto your shirt, which can lead to issues with printing as your shirt kind of grips and grabs onto that rubber and can kind of make it look like you have a tuma underneath your shirt. So I changed out to what I consider to be the best concealed carry grips ever made for a revolver. So these were made for a bit by Uncle Mike's. Sometimes they were branded as Butler Creek, and they partnered with Craig Spiegel, who is the godfather Mac Daddy pimp of boot grips for revolvers, and created a rubber version of his wood grips. However, these must have been selling a little too well and hurting his business as far as his wood grips go, because they ceased that partnership, so these were not made for very long. The rubber is not sticky, so it will not grab to your shirt. It also has great diamond checkering for traction. The thumb dimple is the best part of Craig Spiegel's design, very ergonomic, and helps you manage the recoil of the 357 Magnum revolver. And of course, that boot style grip is short, so it doesn't print under your shirt, and it's not too fat and bulky, unlike the wood stocks that come on this. These are hard to find. You're gonna have to check eBay. I have 2 sets for K&L frames, and I've got 1 set for J frames. The J frames are much easier to find than the K&L frames. So this also allegedly comes with a Performance Center tuned trigger and action. I don't know, it's maybe a little better than a standard Smith & Wesson revolver. This has always been kind of a marketing thing. Even this early Performance Center Lew Horton 681-4, this was made in '96, right before they started slapping locks on the guns, and even this one did not have a great trigger or action. So the Performance Center is mostly just the actual configurations of the guns themselves, more so than the tuning of the trigger and action. I mean, Nelson Ford at the Gunsmith Inc., his action jobs, night and day. He makes the action jobs at the Performance Center at Smith & Wesson look like garbage. But honestly, Smith & Wesson triggers aren't terrible out of the box anyways, so it's not really a deal breaker. We all really get stoked about Performance Center revolvers because of all of the cool, unique features they have on them, like that L-Comp. The trigger has an over travel stop on there, which gives the single action trigger pull on this almost no travel, which is very nice for precision shooting at distance. It also makes the reset feel a little shorter, which is nice because Smith & Wesson revolvers have great resets. They just rocket forward ready for you to touch off that next shot. Smith & Wesson also has this amazing cylinder release here for speed. They likely poached it off of Nelson Ford, but regardless, it's a really good design for fast reloads. You can see what the cylinder releases used to look like on these things. They were fine. It was more built for ergonomics and comfort than for speed. Now, I mentioned the older hammer-nosed ignition system that used to be on Smiths. This was a very reliable system for setting off hard primers, so you wouldn't have any issues whatsoever. It also made it so that you could get much lighter triggers on these things while maintaining the ability to light off primers. So the fact that they removed that hammer nose firing pin and now instead it is frame mounted, you have to go a little heavier on your action jobs, so you can't get as nice of a trigger on these new ones as you could the older ones. Otherwise, you'll start getting light strikes. In fact, from the factory, some of these Smith & Wesson revolvers are still getting light strikes. I've seen it with these 7-shots a few times. So I really struggle to recommend this thing out of the box as a great carry revolver. I just can't recommend this thing without a bunch of asterisks of like, yeah, I recommend this, but. But something to consider is that a revolver in this configuration that was made back in the days where Smith & Wesson was producing the highest quality revolvers on the planet, those vintage wheel guns with a configuration like this, 3-inch barrel, an integral compensator, these will go for more than double what this costs new. And then of course it's so nice and so rare that you're not going to want to carry it and sweat all over it and maybe lose it in a defensive shoot. But it cannot be denied that the way this gun is set up right now, the actual shooting performance is unbelievable. The way that you can run comfortably and quickly full power 357 Magnum loads out of this thing is otherworldly. It is one of the biggest reasons that when I'm going to carry a revolver for the day, I go to this one. It's my workhorse, I don't feel bad about beating it up, and it performs exceptionally well at the range. So in my opinion, it's still worth getting one of these and going through the trouble of changing a few things on it in order to get it up to snuff. Honestly, it is what it is. I'm grateful they're still making this configuration. If they continued making these revolvers the way that they were, without metal injection molded parts, everything hand fitted, these revolvers would cost like as much as a quarth. So while many of you will probably look at this Performance Center offering and be like, that's really expensive, the bones, the foundation that you are buying with this are the best bang for the buck. So if you're willing to put in some additional money and effort after purchasing one of these, then I do recommend it. But if you are looking to invest in a quality revolver that is ready to go out of the box, then the modern Smith & Wesson is a bit of a mixed bag. If you guys want to see more revolver videos from me, let me know in the comments down below because I'm kind of in a revolver mood right now. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video on the 586L comp. Hopefully it can help you make a decision as to whether or not this is a good fit for you. Before you head out, don't forget to make sure you are subscribed and hit that like, thumbs up button. And other than that, it was great seeing you again, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm Brett, and this was Nightwood Guns. Nightwood out.